This D4 almost disintegrated one of my players into a fine pile of dust. How did that happen? So first off, I'm going to talk a little bit about how my pen and paper thing works, because it's not really like it's not really Dungeons and Dragons or anything that you know, but at the same time it's nothing really special. It's just a self-made thing that I did for some of my friends back in the day and just decided to go with. It's basically it's the most simple thing you can imagine, where you just make a character that has a bunch of stats, and then you just show up to an adventure. You don't need to read any rule books or anything. You just make it. You just make a character with some basic stats. You go in, and then I basically put you in that world, and then I just say, what do you want to do? And then you just say whatever you want to do, and I'll tell you what happens. So it's pretty much something that is based almost solely on the dungeon master. In that case, it was me, basically providing absolutely everything about the story and about everything that's happening and about everything about the gameplay, the rules, everything. It all hangs in the balance of the game master's or the dungeon master's whim. So of course it's a type of like pen and paper where you have to rely on the DM, and I guess since I'm talking about my own one, I can't just say like, oh, I'm doing an absolutely amazing job, but at least so far everyone's had an absolute blast with it, and I've been playing with people that I'm also doing other Dungeons and Dragons groups, like actual Dungeons and Dragons I think they were playing, or some other rulebooks, and they told me that at least mine was very special, and it was really cool and very awesome, very interesting, very unique, stuff like that. Words, positive stuff. So I can show you like one of the character sheets that I have right here. This is basically just you have to have a bunch of stats, a bunch of secondary stats, some skills, some abilities that you have, some points like perception or whatever, or athletics, something like that, some weapons, some passives, and that's all there is to it. That's the entire character. And that's also pretty much also everything that the player needs. The player doesn't need anything. The player doesn't need a backside. The player just needs some place to put down like what items they're carrying. That's all the player actually needs. And on the other side, also me as the DM, I'm also not actually putting that much work into it. Like I can show you how I write one of my adventures. Like this is one entire adventure that took us like 5 hours to get through. This is all that I've written down and all that I had in my head going into that adventure for like 5 hours worth of content. Like this is all I had, and this is pretty much how I've gone ahead and created my own stuff. So the world that I've been playing in it's some medieval fantasy world, but the hook about it is that the humans that have been living in that world, they accidentally opened a wormhole to some other dimension, and then from that other dimension, like a bunch of different races came in. They were like mechanical people, like some sort of cyborgs came in. They were like fish people. Some ethereal people came in. Ethereal humanoids came in. Some sort of gnomish, impish dudes came in. Some orc ogre hybrids, and I think some really weird races came in, and they basically said, well, this is our world now, killed all the humans, eradicated the entire life that was on their planet, and then they basically just took the planet for themselves. And this is where the story starts, and you have a bunch of adventurers from all the different races coming together, and they're looking for oddities, and oddities are like just really crazy stuff. They can be items, they can be monsters, they can be names, places, spells. That can be pretty much anything that is just super crazy and weird. It basically is, the whole setting is supposed to be like a joke. There's a lot of puns going around, and it's more mainly focused on comedy, but of course there still is some conflict that the characters have to resolve for there to be an adventure, of course. So for example, one of the oddity items that one of the players acquired was the helmet of invisibility, which was a helmet that when you put it on, you would be invisible, but you couldn't see anything from inside because it was completely covered in the front. And if you were to tamper with it, the invisibility would you wouldn't be invisible anymore. So that you just had to deal with that. There's also like in German we have the Sturmfeuerzeug. This is a German, by the way. I'm doing everything in German, but I can tell you in English anyway. The Sturmfeuerzeug is basically, it's one of those Zippos there's like these lighters that also work in a storm, but the idea behind that thing was it only works in a storm. So when the players want to use it, they have to like blow on it really hard with multiple people so that it thinks it's a storm, and then it works, something like that. So it's like really weird stuff. That's basically what I tried to do with the setting. And then we just basically had a lot of fantasy fun happening all the time. And because I had stuff coming from all different dimensions, we could have cyborgs and magic wizards and like regular people. I guess they're not humans, but still regular people like peasants, all live together in this really weird mishmash of worlds. And I think it actually worked out pretty well so far. So coming to the actual adventure where all this stuff happened is the players found themselves in some sort of super high-tech mechanical areas that was home to some hostile mechatrons. Well, mechatrons with the like weird cyborg guys. They had like some organs inside them, but most of the body was made of like rusty iron. And the joke behind them was that even though they're like super high technology cyborgs, they were made of like really cheap iron. They were rusty. They broke down often. They were actually quite crappy, even though they had this amazing technology. And they also, I mean, because they had like organs and stuff, they were still like kind of humanoids and people they could talk normally. Though of course I made a joke of some of them talking like stereotypical androids and stuff. So that happened. So they were in that area. Everything was super mechanized. They had like the room they were in. So I'm just gonna jump straight to it. They came into a room where the floor, everything was there were like a lot of cables around the floor and a lot of cogs. This is also something like that I did with the aesthetics behind Mechatrons. Mechatrons love gears everywhere on their bodies, on their environments that they create everywhere. It's just their thing. So they have a lot of gears go everywhere. You have a lot of cables running around. There's like steel plates all over the wall. It's a circular room. It's not that very big. There's like some glass plates on the wall, but they are you can't see through them. They're just glass. And they come into that room, and basically the group has 4 people. And one of the guys picked up at one point the name tag of invincibility. Basically in German, Schild. Schild can mean name tag, but also like a shield that a knight has. So it would be the shield of invisibility, but in German it's like shield, and name tag, same word, so it's a pun. Woo, funny. But in this, so it is the name tag of invincibility if I were to translate it into English, and they didn't quite know how it worked. They did some testing with it, like you slap it and then it like works and it's activated, and then like a guy punched him and he didn't take any damage because he was invincible, the name tag of invincibility active, and instead the guy that punched him, I rolled a dice, none of them noticed that, but I rolled the dice, and the guy that through the punch, he took the damage back onto himself. So they were like, okay, I guess it like reflects down or something. That's pretty cool. So they came into that room, and then the room itself started to like sort of come to life. There was like lights went on, were flashing. A lot of the gears and cogs were suddenly turning all over the room, and the cables everywhere started whizzing and stuff, and like everything, oh, what's going on? And then the group felt a bit weird for a second, and then from one second to the other, suddenly in front of them, like out of nowhere, a guy stands in front of them, has a giant cannon next to him, and the cannon is like whizzing with electrical energy. And there's like a countdown, it's like 5, 4, and like 3 of the guys immediately say, okay, I jump to the side, I dodge the cannon, which was the intended solution. But I guess something to also mention is because there's not really any rules, everything is happening in my own head in this case, I can just do whatever the hell I want, which I think is a really big boon that I was hoping more people would do with D&D. I actually really hate that D&D has such an extensive rule set and that people get so deep into the rules, which sounds bad to say, but I think that there's so much potential in just using fantasy and imagination as what it is, instead of like trying to impose really rigid rule sets to make it like realistic, I guess. I don't know. This is a whole nother discussion, but what I like to do is I like to just roll with it. I like to just see what do my players do, how can I react to that. 90% of what's happening in my stories and in my adventures are all like completely improvised, but I can deal with that perfectly fine because I'm like used to improvising a lot of stuff, so I don't mind that. I know a lot of it's not that safe. Like sometimes bad stuff happens if I can't improvise something on the spot, but usually it works out. So far it's worked out over like 25 sessions or so that I've done. It's pretty much always worked out, so been going fine. Anyway, the reason why I bring this up is because, like I said, the jumping to the side and letting the cannon fire, like it was going to fire a big laser at them. It's going to fire and miss everyone. But in this case, the guy with the name tag on invisibility was trying to push his luck, and he activates the name tag and he stands right in front of the cannon. Cannon fires him giant laser of doom death, and it doesn't damage him. Now, at this point, I rolled a dice. I rolled exactly this d4, and it landed on a specific number. And then I said, okay, you don't take any damage. The guy in front of you with the giant cannon, he looks very surprised. He looked surprised even before the cannon fired. And then after the cannon is fired, he suddenly disappears again into nowhere, and you don't know what happened. It's a bit weird. It's supposed to be a moment of mystery that gets cleared up later. Like later, they will get the opportunity to figure out what happened in that moment. And if you played Final Fantasy XIV, you might already guess where this is going, because I wanted to use a specific mechanic in my game for just a one-off. I just wanted to do a little one-off mechanic, and I thought this would be a cool thing to do. And then while I was trying to come up with a scenario, I remembered a scenario from Final Fantasy XIV, and I was like, oh yeah, that could actually work. So I did something similar to that. Anyway, so the guy disappeared. That was supposed to be mystery. Later on, they can clear up what happened. But after the guy got hit with that cannon and didn't take any damage, and I rolled the dice, I was like, you hear a blood-curdling scream of pain coming from behind one of the glass panels on the wall. So I'm not going to spoil anything, of course. I'm just going to tell you how the group experienced this. And so they hear that scream coming from behind the glass panels, and they don't hear anything else, just that scream, and then suddenly it's silence again. And they go up to one of those glass panels. The glass panel is a bit high on the wall. They have to like go up for like 2-3 meters, no problem. The guys have like a mini trampoline with them. They have like a little trampoline that is like that you can like take out, and it like folds up instantly and gets bigger, and then you can jump on it. This is one of those oddities. I like stuff like that. So it's like a portable trampoline. You can just put it on, boom. And so they just did that. They went on the trampoline, they took a hammer, they hammered down the glass panel and saw that, oh, there's a room behind that. I can tell you guys that this was not intended that they find that room, but there is indeed a room, at least at this point. There's a room behind that glass panel, one of the glass panels at least. They get up on there. One guy doesn't quite nail the jump and slices himself up on some glass, but whatever. They get up into that room, and in that room they see it's like a control room, and they also see that from the other side the glass is see-through, so they could be seen from that control room up there. It just has a bunch of panels in front of them, but the room has no... It doesn't have an entrance. And of course the players were like, oh, I'm gonna try and feel around and press some buttons and see if there's like a hidden entrance. There actually wasn't. There was no intended entrance into that room. Why? That gets cleared up a bit later as well. But they also found like 3 dead mechatrons lying in front of the control panel, and the control panel apparently has been used because it's like doing like it's like stirring and whizzing a bit, and it doesn't quite react to any button presses, and they can't quite make out, like, a bunch of people, like there was like one guy who was like really good with technology, but even he couldn't figure out exactly what it does. But he did figure out that, oh, the control panel is indeed for controlling like the entire room, like what that entire room does, but he couldn't quite figure out exactly what that room actually did. So they see the dead mechatrons. I can tell them, like, okay, you see that all the mechatrons, they died from many different weapons. And there's also a giant pool of blood behind the mechatrons, like 2 meters away of something, and it doesn't belong to the mechatrons, but like a giant pool of blood there. And now everyone's going like, what the fuck happened here? So everyone's totally weirded out by this at first, but after trying for a few minutes to see if there's like another hidden exit or something on that room, they go back into the other room, and there is another entrance into that room, I'm talking about the big room with the the like glass panes. They go back into that room where they got almost shot with the laser. So that room has a different exit, and they just leave. And they were like, okay, maybe this is gonna become apparent at some point. We're not just quite sure what happened here. So they move on. Some other stuff happens. You know, the usual stuff. Guys pulling out ladders out of their asses. Whatever. So they get to the control room of that entire big area of that like keep that they were in, that like mechanical iron keep of Mechatron goodness. And in that control room, they see a guy in front of some monitors, and you can see, oh, the monitors show every room in that entire area. So he saw the group doing all that other stuff. But there was also like sort of a war going on outside the keep, and the group was sort of like managed to get away from that sort of battle or whatever that was going on. War is a bit weird, but it was like a battle. There was like a battle going on outside. They somehow got past that battle, got to that guy in front of the monitors in the control room. Turns out that guy's like the mastermind behind everything. He's trying to basically nuke a city. There's a bit of story going on here where it's like a bit... I really don't like having just this guy's evil, you should fight him, and instead being more ambiguous, because I always imagine, what if the players didn't actually fight any like sort of villain, but instead tried to befriend him? And I totally am on board with that. I totally support at any point in any campaign that the players just side with the bad guy, and that actually happened in one of my my adventures that I did, where they did side with the biggest villain that I had set up, and I was like, yeah, sure, you can totally do that, because the characters at that point, they have been morally ambiguous themselves, and the villain put forth some good points, and so they were like, yeah, you know, actually it makes sense to do with that. Some other stuff happened, and that adventure sadly ended in a way that I did not expect, but that had nothing to do with the whole villain thing. Anyway, that's also something with when you're not sticking to rules or any sort of big plan or any other skeleton of a story, you can just always be like, oh yeah, you killed the good guy and you joined the bad guy. I mean, to begin with, they're not really good guy and bad guy. They're just guys who, if I were to explain them to you, you would be like, oh yeah, that guy's probably a good guy, that guy's probably a bad guy. But it's all ambiguous. You can do whatever you want to do. That, like freedom of choice, and also freedom of how I portray characters as being ambiguous rather than just good or bad. That's something that I stand for when I make just stories in general. Anyway, so that guy, he was trying to nuke the city, but it was kind of ambiguous exactly how evil he actually is, because he said that, oh, I sent multiple evacuation notices to that city because I don't actually want to kill anyone. And he said that, well, there might be some casualties, but that I guess it's just collateral damage and stuff. And there's a whole other story going on there, but it was perfectly reasonable for anyone to be like, actually, I kind of understand where this guy is coming from, and this guy's cause, he might be a bit extreme, but his cause does make sense. I can't quite go into all of that. Anyway, so they decided to barter with him a bit. He's like, okay, I can give you a bunch of items, some oddities, cool stuff. I can reward you if you just let me do my stuff. And he would have done that. Of course, they're trying to figure out, oh, is this guy lying to us? He was actually telling the truth. He would have actually just rewarded them for not thwarting his plans, I guess. And they could have actually become friends. He could have actually joined the group after that as like an NPC that follows them around and helps them. That could have actually happened. I would not have minded that at all. So my group, though, they smell a boss fight. So some people in the group, they try and get to the reward anyway, but then still want to fight him. And the group sort of squabbles with a lot of the different people in the group squabble with each other, which happens quite a lot, actually, through all of my different campaigns that I did. There were always many, many places where the group squabbles in itself, just figuring out if they should sort of join the sort of boss, if they should barter with him, deal with him, or if they should attack him, or what they should actually do with him. Because like I said, it's a bit of a gray area. Anyway, I'm getting on way too many tangents. So what happened was they end up, he wanted to try, after some time, the guy realized that, okay, these guys are just stalling me. I'm just going to fire the nuke, whatever, dude. So they do end up fighting him. Only 2 people in my 4-people group actually start fighting him. and the other two just stand in the corner. Like one of the guys says, I go into the corner and put on the helmet of invisibility, and I just wait. Sure. And then another guy was like, oh yeah, I do the same thing, and he just sat down next to the other guy. So the other two guys have the boss fight. I have some music to go along. I have this like lore thing where the Mechatrons are really into guitars, because guitars, when they hear the sound, it like gives them motivation, gives them power. So the boss actually had like a track playing that he really liked. So I would be like, okay, I'm gonna play a sound, but it's also gonna play like in universe, because the boss is psyching himself up to it with like some guitar music, because he really likes that and it gets him pumping. And that was also a plot point early in the story where the group was actually like revered for having a guitar, and they were like strumming along with a guitar, and they were like a bunch of Mechatrons going, oh yeah, amazing, whatever. I say that a lot, whatever. I go on like tangents and then just cut them off with whatever. So they fight the guy, they deal much damage to him. The other two guys decide to join because it's taken a while, and all four fight the boss. And then the boss does, well, I see that I can't really defeat you, but I have this like special thing that I'm gonna do, and he does it, and he like lifts up his finger, and then suddenly he disappears, and left behind is this like black swirling gate where he stood. And there was like another NPC around who at that point said like, oh my god, that the last time he did that, the guys that he was in the room with just randomly fell over dead. So the group was like, oh, we should probably also jump into that gate and see if maybe whatever he's doing, we can stop him before we fall over dead. So they jump into that gate as well, and then I tell them, oh, you appear in a room that you find, that you feel you've already seen before, and they find themselves in the old control room with a bunch with 3 Mechatrons hammering away on some buttons. Behind them is a pane of glass, a full pane of glass, and through that pane of glass they see themselves standing in the middle of a circular room with cogs and gears on the floor and some cables running around that is whirring and searing and whirring very loudly. And then suddenly they themselves, well, the people that they see outside, which are themselves, get frozen, and then the guy they were fighting pops up in front of them and pulls out a cannon and starts charging it, firing at the group. So they realize, oh shit, we traveled through time, and these are our past selves. He wants to kill our past selves, then we would die in the future. Cool. So this was basically what I had in mind. They would basically just save themselves. The whole thing would be resolved. They kill the 3 Mechatrons. They disable the freezing field. They would be able to dodge the cannon, and then everything would be fine. They dodge the cannon, the guy disappears again into the future, they themselves also disappear again into the future, and they continue the boss fight as if nothing had happened. So they fight the 3 Mechatrons as they should, to try and disable the freeze field and they don't kill themselves, save their past selves. And they do that, they fight against the guys. They have a real weird fight going on where the one guy has like the ability to like enter people's minds, and he enters one of the Mechatron's minds and gets him to like open up his own body and then go inside his own body with his arm and gets his hand stuck in his inner gears. A bit gruesome, but that happened. So one thing that happens is the guy that had the name tag of invincibility, he activated the name tag again, and he got hit because one of my guys who has a sword rolled a 1. He let go of the sword through the crit fail, by the way, because 1 is crit fail, 20 is crit success, because I'm not playing Das Schwarze Auge where it's reversed. I'm playing D&D rules, whatever. So the sword goes out of his hand, it hits him, like impales his head or whatever, but he takes no damage because he has the steel invincibility. So you can just take this, take the sword out again, and he's completely fine. There's no damage, and he's good again. He takes no damage. But they see the first guy is, oh shit, I'm gonna the damage that I gave my friend is gonna reflect back onto me because I accidentally hurt him. But as it turns out, I roll another die, another D6 I think it was, And I say, oh yeah, one of the Mechatrons suddenly grabs his head in pain and falls over dead. And this is the point where they have a bit of a where they say like, oh, that's how the name tag of invincibility works. It doesn't reflect the damage back to the guy who initially dealt it. It's random. It randomly takes the damage and puts it on someone else. Oh, I see. So and they were like, oh, so I can like jump off a cliff, and if there's someone around where I land, the damage would get transferred onto that guy, and that guy would die, but I would survive. And I was like, yeah, you could do that. And the group was like, oh yeah, that's actually pretty cool. I can do some cool stuff with that. I just have to make sure it doesn't hit my teammates, because if it hits my teammates randomly, that would be really bad. But yeah, we can give that to someone who's on low HP, and the damage would like reflect to other people. And even if it hits a teammate, at least they're not dying. So that would be really good. So the team is going like, oh yeah, that's pretty good. And we can do a whole lot of stuff with that. We can like tank everything. And I was like, yeah, you could even reflect the damage of a giant laser onto a random other target. And this is the point where suddenly, I'm gonna mime this for you, how the reaction went with my players. They were like, oh shit, because they just realized they were in a room that in just a few seconds is gonna have a giant puddle of blood where the group is standing right now. Because it didn't come from the 3 Mechatrons, it came from somewhere else. We're gonna have a giant puddle of blood with a blood-curdling stream of pain after someone gets hit by a giant death laser and reflects the damage to a random target. At this point, my group absolutely panicked and almost threw over the table. Holy shit, our past selves are just about to kill us. So they realized that there was nothing really they could do, because if they don't save their past selves, they would die anyway, and if they save their past selves, someone is gonna get lasered. So this is the point where this dice came in, because I rolled it when the laser initially hit. There were 4 people, and I said one of those people is gonna be the target from the giant death laser. And what they did was 2 of the people had passives where if they died, they would get resurrected with very, very little HP. Like there was a whole lot of other system going on there, but they could do that like once. So like once they could get hit and get revived with like very little HP. It was like a one-time thing, pretty much. Not really, but pretty much. In this case it was. And like 3 of my guys were on like 20 HP, which was very, very little. So 3 of my guys were almost dead. One of my guys was still on like 70 HP because he just doesn't take damage. I'm trying to deal damage to him, but he keeps evading damage, whatever. And the guy with the 70 HP was also the guy who had the name tag of invincibility, the guy who also tanked the laser. And what happened is, I knew who it was gonna hit already. Like I knew the entire time who it was gonna hit. As soon as the laser was tanked, I already rolled out who was gonna hit. This entire time, I'm just looking at all of these players, looking at their HP numbers, and seeing what they do, and trying to see if the guy who's gonna get hit is about to get absolutely destroyed. So the guy who has the name tag of invisibility, who also has the 70 HP, decides that if he gets hit, he's fine, because he has 70 HP, which is really a lot. That's a load. That's like a shit ton of health. So he's like, okay, even if it's a giant death laser, I have so much, I can probably survive it. And he also had that passive where he can survive if he takes fatal damage. That's fine. Another guy had the passive. He's gonna be fine. Then he gave the name tag of invincibility to some other guy who has on like 20 HP. So that guy would kind of be fine, because if it hit him, the damage would be reflected again, and then it could still hit one of the guys who can like die once and they'll be fine. There was only like one guy who could actually like immediately get disintegrated with no chance. So this is the point where the climax of the story sadly isn't quite as entertaining as everything leading up to this, because I told him who was gonna get hit. It was the guy with the 70 HP who also originally tanked the damage. It ended up hitting him as well by the fate of this D4. So yeah, his entire arm and up to about here was just disintegrated, like exploded. Giant gush of blood came from about here. He took like 50 damage, and I told him, okay, you take 50 damage and you're fatally bleeding, about to die any second. Even with the, I guess the like one time you get to survive thing would have kind of saved him, but he would still be bleeding. So then, even if he got revived from that passive, he would still be bleeding, and then he would just die again. So they still had to do something about the wound. Like some guy had like another oddity where he can like put his hand into a black hole and pull out a random item depending on how well he rolls. People have lost their arms to that, but I guess he had some good luck because he grabbed some like black powder, and they ignited that black powder and basically cauterized this entire half of his body, which did like another like 20 damage to him or whatever, but at least he wasn't bleeding anymore. So now that guy is like missing a good chunk of his body, still in terrible pain, and he's lost like he's not lost his entire 70 damage health. He's lost like 65. I forgot how much it was, but it's like 65 damage, and he was like almost dead in like one hit. Everyone breathes a sigh of relief, apart from the guy who got absolutely demolished, and he was just like, it's just a flesh wound, I'm gonna walk it off. The guy travels back into the future. They get pulled back into the future as well. They disappear. They back in the future, they kill the boss. Everyone's happy, kind of. And absolutely everyone is completely fucked at that point, especially that one guy, but I think he's gonna be fine. I think he's gonna be fine. I have a bunch more stories like that. Not quite as amazing as that one, but still quite alright, I guess. So yeah, if you want to hear more of that, then tell me. But like I said, the other stuff that I have is not quite as amazing as this. It's just like, oh, some cool stuff happened here and there. Like it's not gonna be this whole sort of like, oh my god, amazing. But maybe you still want to hear that, even if the quality isn't quite as amazing as this one. So yeah, like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed it. See you guys next time.